Another busy day in the NBA to say the least. The Bulls were somewhat busy for the most part. At least they finally signed Zach Levine, which we all knew was coming. And they even re-signed Derrick Jones Jr. to a cheap deal, which of course keeps the Bulls right under the luxury tax line because we all know the owners are cheap as hell and never pay the tax. But aside from the Bulls moves, you had arguably the biggest move of the offseason thus far anyway, and that was the blockbuster trade that sent Rudy Gobert to the Wolves for like 13 first-round picks or whatever it was. But anyway, in this video, we're going to be recapping the latest moves of the NBA offseason, how it impacts the Bulls, and we're going to be focusing mainly on the Gobert trade. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I touched on the Bulls' two signings from yesterday's video, so I won't go too much into that here. But in short, you saw Zach Levine agree to a 5-year max contract to the tune of $215 million. And the Bulls also re-signed Derrick Jones Jr. to a 2-year deal at $6.6 million. The max contract for Zach was obviously expected, given the reports leading up to free agency that the Bulls fully intended to offer him the max and that Zach would be accepting it. What was more surprising was the Bulls re-signing Derrick Jones Jr. I think most people assumed he would be headed to another team with the direction the Bulls were taking and trying to address their needs of rim protection and shooting. I'll be honest, part of the reason I thought Derrick Jones Jr. was gone was because I thought he would get better offers from other teams that the Bulls just simply would not be able to compete with. But 2 years, $6.6 million, that's far less than what I would have expected Derrick Jones Jr.'s value to be. I mentioned it in a few videos leading up to free agency that I personally thought all of the Bulls' current free agents would in fact be gone and not returning to Chicago, but Derrick Jones Jr. was the one free agent I actually was okay with the Bulls re-signing as long as it was on a cheap deal, and it was. I am a little disappointed in the fact that the Bulls really haven't solved their rim protection and shooting woes, more specifically getting better at defending the pick and roll. Their two signings of Andre Drummond and Derrick Jones Jr. don't really solve for that. Of course, I'm disappointed with the fact that these two moves are very calculated in ensuring that the Bulls are below the tax line. Something we all know ownership will never do because they are notorious for being cheap. But I won't go into that because I already made a video of me ranting about the Reinsdorfs and how stingy they are. You can check out the video in case you missed it. But as far as the Zach signing, I mentioned before, it was expected and had to be done. That's the price you pay to keep your star talent in his prime at the age of 27. And given there was so much emphasis from the front office about maintaining continuity and keeping the core together, you knew there was no way that they were going to let Zach go. Just no way. So this really is it right here. Zach is committed for the long haul. The Bulls have made him the future of this franchise that you would build around. It's a pretty big deal. Like, this is the first over $100 million contract in Bulls history. Yes, Bulls history. And the contract was actually over $200 million. Just wild. But you know what was even more wild? Rudy Gobert getting traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I promise I will be linking this back to the Bulls because it does actually impact them, and I'll explain why in a bit. But after all of the trade rumors about the Jazz finally moving on from the Donovan Mitchell-Rudy Gobert experiment, they pulled the trigger and traded Rudy Gobert. They're likely going to be blowing up this whole roster, but for now, just Gobert has been moved, and they did so for an insane haul. 4 first-round picks. Yes, 4 first-round picks. Technically 5 because the Wolves also included their first-round pick from this year's draft in Walker Kessler. 3 of which are unprotected. 3 unprotected draft picks for 2023, 2025, and 27. And then top 5 protected in 2029. That's got to be the biggest haul of draft picks I have seen, if my memory serves me correctly, at least when it comes to the level of protections anyway. I said this when talking about the Hawks trading unprotected picks to the Spurs for DeJounte Murray. Trading unprotected first-round picks is such a big gamble in the NBA. Because while yes, the assumption is after making this trade, you now have Rudy Gobert, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, hell, even along with D'Angelo Russell as another potential trade piece that they're probably going to move, you'd have to think that these aren't going to be lottery picks, more like late first rounders, but that's the crazy thing about the NBA. You don't know how a given season is going to transpire. You can't predict unforeseen circumstances like major injuries to your star players that would derail your season, or say players getting unhappy and demanding a trade that sends the team spiraling, kind of like what we're seeing from the Nets right now. Like, these are far future picks, some of them that they traded to the Jazz. Are you that confident that you're still going to be a top team in 2027 when Gobert is in his mid-30s and Cat is in his early 30s? That assumes that they even fit together and are still together by then. Who's to say Anthony Edwards doesn't get frustrated if the team doesn't start contending now and he wants out? Say you fall into the lottery in one of those years because of injuries to the team and you somehow get lucky, or I guess I should say unlucky in this instance, and you fall into the top 3 of the draft lottery. You couldn't have at least made it top 3 protected? Now, if you guys have been following the channel for a while now, you know I'm not about hoarding draft picks. I would much prefer established players than future players that may end up bombing once they actually get to the league. I've always said the NBA draft is a bit of a crapshoot when you have superstar players getting drafted in mid to late first round, sometimes even the second round, and then you have top 5 picks who end up becoming busts. But there is something to be said about trading so much draft capital, especially when it's unprotected, that you have nothing to work with if your team fizzles out. And need I remind everyone that Danny Ainge is now running things over in Utah. Do people not remember what the man did to the Nets back in the day when he traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett for a ton of draft capital? Everyone thought he was crazy giving up on your foundational players who were still star level players at the time. Well, those picks that they acquired, future first round picks, unprotected by the way, ended up being top 3 picks because the Nets team completely flopped. And those picks ended up becoming Jaylen Brown and the number 1 pick in 2017, which the Celtics used to trade down in the draft at number 3 to get Jason Tatum. And they were able to trade another one of those acquired picks to the Cavs in the Kyrie Irving trade. Like, have teams not learned from other teams' mistakes, especially when it comes to dealing with Danny Ainge? Now, it's very possible those picks that the Wolves traded to the Jazz amount to nothing, and they get an elite-level defender without having to give up any of their core, but it's such a big risk when you're sending that many picks a team's way for a player who is on such a massive contract and has struggled in the playoffs. Also, it wasn't just the picks the Wolves sent them. They also included 4 players: Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Jared Vanderbilt, and Leandro Balmoro, which these are really just salary dumps for the Wolves to be able to match the money. The crux of the trade are those draft picks. But anyway, how does this relate to the Bulls? Well, aside from the fact that the Bulls have been rumored to be a potential frontrunner to land Rudy Gobert in a trade, and now that is obviously off the table, which you guys know I was all about the Bulls going all in on Rudy Gobert. I know a lot of people disagree with that take and think that Gobert is overrated and a liability on offense, but the fact of the matter is Gobert is still one of the best defenders in the NBA. Hell, even one of the best defenders the league has seen in history. He's an elite level rim protector, which the Bulls need. He's great at defending the pick and roll, also something the Bulls need, and he's great at operating in the pick and roll on offense, which is, again, something the Bulls need. More importantly, Gobert, with perimeter defenders, something the Jazz never had, would be unstoppable, which the Bulls do have in Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso. I just think Gobert would have been the perfect fit for this team. My biggest hangup was his contract and the fact that you're going to have to give up a lot for him in a trade, but I truly believe had the Bulls been able to make a trade for Gobert work, that would have made them title contenders. But now we see why the Bulls were not able to trade for him. To be honest, I'm glad that they didn't at that level of value. Like, there was no way the Bulls were going to be able to offer a better trade package than the insane one that the Wolves did. Part of the problem is when you want to make a trade for another star level player, and from a team that is looking to retool or rebuild for the future, they're going to be looking for young assets and draft capital, which is nothing surprising, right? And the Bulls just don't have that. They have a few draft picks that they can actually trade, since they don't have a first round pick that they can trade until 2027 aside from the Portland pick. They have some younger players with upside potential, namely Patrick Williams and Dosunmu. You can even include Kobe White in there if you want, but it's nothing like the package that a team like the Wolves could offer, because they already traded their future draft picks for Vucevic and DeMar, although those are in fact protected. So look, as fine as I am with the Bulls missing out on Gobert, because that is way too much to give up for Rudy, it was a bit of a reality check when it comes to the Bulls making any meaningful trades this offseason, because when you look at the fact that it took 3 first-round picks to get DeJounte Murray, 4 first-round picks to get Rudy Gobert, it demonstrates that the Bulls do not have enough assets to make a big trade for a piece that takes them to the next level. Not saying that they don't have assets to make a trade for some complementary role players, but it shows that the Bulls were likely never in the running for a guy like Gobert, which would mean they're even further in the running for a guy like Kevin Durant. Not that I thought that getting KD was even a real possibility, but even any other star players is unlikely at this point for the Bulls, unless of course you're looking to give up some of your core, which it sounds like the Bulls are not willing to do. In other small news as far as free agency signings go, Donte DiVincenzo agreed to a 2-year deal of $9.3 million with the Golden State Warriors, which was a little disappointing because I actually think DiVincenzo could have been one of those guys that you could pick up for some shooting off the bench. And when you see the deal that he got, you see it was actually something the Bulls could actually have afforded and still keep the cheap Reinsdorfs under the tax threshold. Probably not as much on the Bulls' radar because they're not really looking for more backcourt players, and his shooting has been a little more inconsistent the last couple of seasons. Also, Yusuf Nurkic re-signed with the Blazers for 4 years, $70 million, which that was a surprise to me. I thought he was for sure going to be on his way out of Portland, but it does in fact look like the Blazers are going to be trying to win next season, which is nice considering the pick that they owe the Bulls will likely convey if they can make the playoffs. Only the mid-level exception available to them. And then, of course, you had all the big names get their fat contract extensions. Nikola Jokic extending with the Nuggets with the largest deal in NBA history at 5 years, $270 million. Sorry to all those Bulls fans who thought getting Jokic in 2023 was a possibility. Ja Morant signed an extension. Cat signed an extension, one that actually aligns with Rudy Gobert's contract, by the way. And Devin Booker also signed an extension with the Suns. I mean, there are still some free agents available. DeAndre Ayton and his restricted free agency, that hasn't been solved for yet. We still don't know what is going to be happening with his future. That is one that I'm going to be paying close attention to, as he has been linked to the Bulls a bit in the past. But either way, a busy day 2 in the world of free agency in the NBA. I'm sure more will come about tomorrow in the form of additional signings and potential trades. I'm curious to see what the Jazz are going to do in blowing up their roster. Fingers crossed that the Bulls make a run at Jordan Clarkson to have as their 6th man off the bench. But either way, I'll be keeping you guys posted. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.